Hi, I'm Professor Larry Louie, and welcome to an introduction to design thinking. I know some of you have already taken some coursework in design thinking, whether it's part of your studies or in professional settings. So if it's a repeat, I apologize because I want all of us on the same page to understand the general idea of design thinking and to look at one specific methodology which will be useful, hopefully, to you in your project as we go forward. I'd like to recognize two specific sources of material for what you're going to see in this lecture. The first is some work from the Stanford D School, which has done a lot of work in design thinking and pretty exciting stuff that they've done over the years. And they have a downloadable booklet, if you will, called the Design Thinking Bootleg. And what I like about this is it's very short and it's very organized, and it follows this graphic, which I think is pretty good, a summary of the whole idea behind design thinking, where we start with the problem, we empathize, and that gets us right into the situation that the person encountering the problem is experiencing. Then we define the problems and we start ideating about a solution, leading to some prototyping to test out whether we have something or not, and that can iterate all the time until we get through to a point where we think we've got something. So this is a very powerful technique. It's been used for many, many years in the decades, made famous by IDEO. And we're going to be using some of IDEO's material because I find their material a little more thorough and a little easier to grasp as far as how to do certain things. So my idea about the D-School material is as a great handbook, and it may be even more useful to you as you're going through the design of your capstone project. But I wanted to go through a little more thorough review that you can then insert and pick and choose among the two different approaches to how to go about the process of design thinking. As mentioned, I'm using the IDEO materials here. There's a field guide to human-centered design, which this is taken from, and I find it a great document to read. So you should look at it with more time on your hands rather than me summarizing it perhaps unfairly in a few slides here. But it's a great way to introduce yourself to the IDEO frame of mind and how they think through design thinking. It's not just design, it's design thinking. It's how do you solve a problem by really doing thorough work. It's not at all pie in the sky. It's quite thorough in their orientation. One of the videos you saw was of David Kelly, founder of IDEO, on creative confidence. And it's inspiring to think of people that help others develop the confidence so they can be creative. And often people have an idea, it doesn't take up very well with, say, their superiors, or it failed and it's dropped. And what that does is not only deflate that idea, but also the spirit of the individual. And that is really something we're trying to avoid, is that we want to see the beauty of all ideas and look at them fairly. And if it's a great idea, great. If not, that's okay too. It's certainly not a judgment of the person with the idea. We're only evaluating the idea. So this video is very good about the idea of creative confidence, how we as creators or we as supervisors of the creation of new ideas should always have that culture and encourage people to stretch and reach out a bit, because without that stretching, we won't get anywhere. Or we'll have incremental. We can have incremental gains, but nothing revolutionary. There are 6 principles of design thinking that I'd like you to keep in mind. And they are empathy, learn from failure, make it, embrace ambiguity, optimism, and iterate, iterate, iterate. And I'm going to go through each one in turn. Let's start with empathy. Empathy, in order to get to new solutions, you have to get to know different people, different scenarios, and different places. This is from Emi Kalawale from the Stanford University D School. And the reason this is so powerful is that you have to get absorbed into what the experience is of those who are facing the problem. And I just put up some words here that would reinforce the thought. It shows the value of primary research. Being an academic, we love secondary research. We can look at databases, we can read reports, things of that sort, white papers, research reports, but there's no substitute for primary research. Actually talking to people that are experiencing the pain or have the need, and to put yourself in their shoes if you can. If you are here in the United States and you're trying to visualize what's the problem in Africa, you can't do that very easily. So you could talk to people in Africa, or better still, go to Africa and see for yourself what's going on. I'll show an example of how that changed minds pretty dramatically in a few moments. And there's this idea of cultural anthropology. This is a field that I did not study, and I have some regret about not studying it because it really goes to the culture and what the core beliefs of individuals are. And this is important because we have to induce trial of new ideas. We also have to encourage adoption and repeat purchasing and the behavior we're hoping to find. And that sometimes is based on cultural aspects, whether they were raised to do things like that, or mom and dad did that way or not. So cultural anthropology is a very powerful force when you're talking about people and getting change to be enacted and adopted. And last is watch and listen. Sometimes it's better not to talk. It's better just to watch and listen, and you'll learn more than you talking. Learn from failure. You've probably heard this before. This is Tim Brown. Don't think of it as failure. Think of it as designing experiments through which you're going to learn. Now, this may sound like, oh, you're rationalizing failure. Don't rationalize failure. No, this is absolutely true. It's how we live in Silicon Valley, that unless we try and stretch and occasionally fail, we'll never see any breakthroughs. So this is a key aspect of all startups and the mentality of innovation in Silicon Valley, and I would now say throughout the world. This is not a new concept or one that's only practiced in a small part of the world. It's becoming a frame of mind that is important for us to all innovate, regardless of where we are. And the thoughts here are, you can learn more from failure than success. Absolutely true. Some of you are nodding your head because you can experience this yourself and empathize with this. Next is fail fast. So this is, again, another pet phrase, and that is, if you're going to fail, fail fast. Like, really give it a go. Give it enough resources so that you know that it wasn't a resource issue. You give it the resources, see if it works. If it fails, let it go. If it succeeds, voila, you have a success. But fail fast is another thought here. And then pivot. We always hear that word pivot, right? Pivot just means that you hit something and it didn't work, and you need to move a little or a lot toward something that may work. So pivoting is a good term because it shows the requirement, especially in new companies or creating new ideas, that you must always be moving. And the last on the bottom right hand is have a tolerance for risk and failure. You could say, oh, I tolerate risk, but you also have to tolerate failure. If you're the manager, you're the chief executive officer, and you say, make me the new product for our future. Well, if it fails, you can't castigate them and demote them or fire them. You ask them to do it. And in fact, you need them to not feel that there is any career risk or any other diminished opinion of them for trying. So these are important not only to learn from failure as a person, but also create a culture and an organizational approach where we experiment and we love for them to succeed, but occasionally they fail, and we don't judge the person. We judge the idea that failed. And this is an important concept. Next is make it. And this is from Krista Donaldson, CEO of DREV. You're taking risk out of the process by making simple first. And you can always learn from it. So if you're building a new fancy machine, you could build it out of plywood and plastic and very crude instrument just to prove the functionality of that machine. And you can show someone and they'll forgive you that it's not beautiful. If it does something very important, then they say, oh, that's something I want to do. I'd like to buy it when you finish the design. So prototyping is a key aspect of design thinking, where it could be a prototype that's non-functional. There was a shop called Tech Shop where you can go and prototype anything out of plastic. You can make devices like a cell phone that didn't work, but it showed the form factor of the cell phone, or different products that you can visualize. But in order to convey it to the customer, you need to show them something, even if it's non-working. So here, the idea is show, don't tell, always more powerful. And you want to be able to have this prototype so that you can show someone an idea. If it's a website, you can show some wireframes or sample slides. If it's a software program, you can show some of the desired functionality and output of the system. If it's something physical, you could mock it up, as I said, with just a non-working model. All these are examples of prototyping, and it's a very important and powerful way to communicate what your idea is and what is your solution that solves that particular problem. Pilot scale is also important. Don't scale it all the way up like you're going to be the next best thing. Have a scale enough so you can manufacture it enough to have initial sales or initial samples for people to try. Start out as a small scale. And then again, watch, listen, and ask. And this is to the prototype. Let them look at it, ask you questions, you answer them. Every question they ask is an important one because it's some clue into how they're evaluating the usefulness of your invention, if you will. And then ask them why they liked it, why they didn't like it, why they looked at a certain part of the screen, why they looked quizzically at one of the buttons that you created. Be with them and don't assume or don't impose your love for your product. Just be very objective about it. Embrace ambiguity. So we want to give ourselves the permission to explore lots of different possibilities so that the right answer can reveal itself. It's not often the first try that gets to success. It's the successive trials and alterations of approaches that lead to success. And this is from Patrice Martin from IDEO. Some words for you to remember that are related to this is curiosity. If it's ambiguous, that should lead to curiosity. Ambiguity shouldn't lead to you turning away. It should lead to, oh, I wonder what's really going on there. It should lead to confidence, is that you have to be confident in order to explore something that is ambiguous. That is a test of your confidence, and it's a way for you to build that skill and that attribute in yourself. Be fearless, same as confidence, right? Don't think of it as something that will fail. Think of it as an adventure. And finally, be observant, because with the ambiguity will be cues along the way that you may seem like a murky picture, but small things will start revealing themselves to you. And when you're observant, you may be able to piece together all those observations into a clear picture, even though you're in the fog. Optimism. Optimism is the thing that drives you forward. This is from John Bielenberg, founder of Future Partners. And that's a common attribute of a lot of people, not just entrepreneurs, but a lot of people are optimistic, right? We like to see that in people. And it's part of the culture. So you're creating that in the culture, or you want to show that optimism also pairs with resilience so that when you do have a setback, you bounce back. So you could be optimistic and have a setback and bounce back. So that goes along with optimism. And then be flexible. Optimism also means that as things go, you need to be adaptive to what's going on and have flexibility. And visualize success. I mean, this is perhaps a sports analogy, but it's one that's good. And it's been proven in psychology that if you visualize the future, you're more likely to hit that goal of whatever you visualize. And they could be if you're playing golf and visualizing your shots along the course, and then you're more able or more likely to hit that shot if you visualize it properly. And we see that in business too. We visualize our own personal success, and that leads to our personal achievement of that particular goal. So this idea of visualization is an important attribute for successful people, whether athletes or business people. Next is iterate, iterate, iterate. And by iterating, we validate our ideas along the way because we're hearing from the people we're actually designing it for. And this is from Gabby Brink from Tomorrow Partners. And this is similar to prototype because prototype is one of those ideas that we iterate. But the iteration may begin with a conversation. Then we iterate with conversation. So it's at all stages of our approach to design thinking that we try over and over again different things, refining it or throwing the old one out and trying something brand new. Whatever is the nature of the feedback, we act upon that. So we listen again, we're customer focused. We may think we're the best idea generator. We may think we're the engineer that solves all the problems, but don't do that. Let it go and listen to what the customer says. And you want to drive to be the best you can have because if you're creating a new product, there may be an incumbent product or competitor which you have to usurp. Well, you're not going to do that unless you have a superior product. So drive toward the best product and adapt. That's the whole idea of iteration. You do something, you see what happened, you change it, and you try it again. That's the nature of the adaptation.